Hello and welcome to Bedtime History. Tonight we journey back in time, not to a specific battle or a decisive moment that changed the map of the world, but into the heart of a silence. We are entering the cold, damp stone walls of a 17th-century French prison, a place of profound isolation and forgotten names. Our focus is not on a king or a queen but on a prisoner, a man whose life was erased, whose face was hidden, and whose identity has become one of the most enduring and fascinating historical mysteries of all time. He is a ghost who walked the earth for over 3 decades, a man known to us only by the object that defined his captivity. This is the story of the Man in the Iron Mask. For over 300 years, his tale has captivated historians, novelists, and philosophers. He is a famous prisoner who remains utterly anonymous, a paradox that has fueled endless speculation. Who was this man, whose face was considered so dangerous that it had to be permanently concealed from the world? What crime could he have possibly committed to warrant such a unique and cruel punishment? And who was the powerful figure who ordered this lifelong erasure? The theories are as wild and romantic as any fiction. Was he, as the great writer Voltaire suggested, the secret twin brother of the glorious Sun King, Louis XIV, imprisoned to prevent a civil war over the throne of France? Was he the illegitimate son of royalty, a disgraced general, a troublesome diplomat who knew too much? Or was the reality something far more mundane, a story that has been inflated by centuries of rumor and imagination? Tonight, we will act as historical detectives. We will sift through the sparse, cryptic evidence that has survived faded letters, prison registers, and whispered accounts. We will trace the prisoner's long, lonely journey through a series of France's most formidable fortresses. We will examine the main suspects, from the highest royalty to the most obscure servants. And we will attempt to peel back the layers of legend to uncover the truth behind this ultimate cold case. This is a story of power, secrecy, and a single solitary life that has become a powerful symbol of injustice. So settle in, as we descend into the dungeons of 17th-century France, and come face to face with its most enigmatic captive. Our story begins not with the prisoner himself, but with the world he inhabited and the king who defined it. To understand the mystery of the Man in the Iron Mask, one must first understand the era of King Louis XIV, France's legendary Sun King. Louis reigned from 1643 to 1715, and his long rule was the absolute pinnacle of monarchical power in Europe. He was the embodiment of the state. His famous, though perhaps apocryphal declaration, "L'état c'est moi, I am the state," perfectly captures the spirit of his reign. This was an age of absolute power and absolute control. Louis XIV built the magnificent Palace of Versailles, a glittering golden cage where he could keep his powerful nobles occupied with petty rituals and courtly intrigue, far from their regional power bases where they might plot against him. He controlled the army, the church, the arts, and, most importantly for our story, he controlled a highly efficient and ruthless system of justice and imprisonment. In the France of Louis XIV, there was no trial by a jury of your peers for matters of state. The king could, with a simple stroke of his pen on a document known as a lettre de cachet, order any person to be imprisoned indefinitely, without trial, without appeal, and without any reason given. It was a terrifying instrument of absolute power. A person could simply vanish from the world, swallowed by the king's prisons, their fate known only to a tiny circle of officials. It was within this system of silent, absolute authority that our prisoner existed. The first documented mention of our mysterious captive appears in a letter dated July 1669. The letter is from the Marquis de Louvois, King Louis XIV famously severe and efficient minister of war, to a man named Benign d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars. Saint-Mars was no ordinary jailer. He was a trusted, high-level official, a man whose entire career was built on his ability to keep secrets and manage special, high-value prisoners for the king. In 1669, Saint-Mars was the governor of the prison fortress of Pignerol. Pignerol was not a common jail for thieves and debtors. It was a high-security state prison, nestled in the Alps, on what was then the French border with Italy. It was a place for the forgotten, for disgraced nobles, political enemies, and men who knew too much. The letter from Louvois informed Saint-Mars that he would soon be receiving a special new prisoner, a man by the name of Eustache Dogger. Louvois' instructions regarding this Eustache Dogger were strangely specific and severe. Saint-Mars was to prepare a cell with multiple doors, one closing on top of the other, to prevent anyone from overhearing anything. The prisoner was to be told that if he ever spoke of anything other than his immediate needs, he would be killed instantly. Saint-Mars himself was to see the prisoner only once a day to deliver his food. And most importantly, Louvois stressed that this Dogger was only a valet, a mere servant, and did not require any special comforts. This last point is crucial and deeply confusing. Why would the powerful Minister of War be personally involved in arranging the imprisonment of a mere valet, under such extreme conditions of secrecy? From the moment of his arrival at Pignerol, Eustache Dogger's existence was defined by isolation. But he was not entirely alone. Saint-Mars, ever the practical jailer, assigned him to act as a servant to another, more famous prisoner already at Pignerol, a disgraced superintendent of finances named Nicolas Fouquet. Fouquet had once been the richest and most powerful man in France after the king, but his ambition and ostentatious wealth had angered Louis XIV, and he was now serving a life sentence. For years, Dogger served Fouquet, bringing him his meals, tending to his needs, but always under the strictest rules. When Fouquet had other visitors, Dogger was locked away. He was never to be seen or heard by anyone else. This arrangement continued until Fouquet's death in 1680. After Fouquet's death, Dogger was placed in even deeper isolation, in a secure cell with another prisoner, a silent old man who died shortly after. All of this is recorded in the official correspondence between Saint-Mars and his superiors. But it is here that we encounter the first mention of the object that would define the legend. After Fouquet's death, Saint-Mars wrote to Louvois about his two remaining prisoners of the lower tower, one of whom was Dogger. There is no mention of a mask in these early years. The secrecy was maintained through pure isolation. The story of the mask begins to take shape later, as Saint-Mars's career progresses. In 1681, Saint-Mars was promoted to be the governor of the prison at Exilles, another remote Alpine fortress. He took his two remaining special prisoners with him, and it is during this transfer, this journey through the outside world, that the need for a physical concealment would have become paramount. Then, in 1687, another promotion. Saint-Mars was made governor of the most famous prison in all of France, the Sainte Marguerite Island Fortress, located in the Bay of Cannes on the glittering French Riviera. Again, he took his mysterious prisoner with him. It was here, on this sun-drenched island, that the legend of the masked man truly began to seep into the public consciousness. Local legends and anecdotal accounts from this period describe the prisoner being seen pacing the battlements of the fortress, always wearing a mask. One famous story tells of the prisoner scratching a message onto a silver plate and throwing it from his window. A local fisherman supposedly found the plate and brought it to Saint-Mars. When Saint-Mars confirmed that the fisherman could not read, he was released with the stern warning, "It is lucky for you that you cannot read." In 1698, Saint-Mars received his final and most prestigious appointment, governor of the infamous Bastille prison in the heart of Paris. And with him, on the journey from the south of France to the capital, came his lifelong captive. This was the moment the prisoner became a Parisian celebrity, a phantom at the center of the nation's gossip. Lieutenant du Junca, the king's lieutenant at the Bastille, recorded the arrival in his official diary on September 18, 1698. He wrote, "At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, de Saint-Mars, governor of the Bastille, arrived, bringing with him in a litter a prisoner he had at Pignerol, whose name is not spoken, and who is always masked. Du Junca's diary provides the most solid contemporary evidence for the mask. He goes on to describe the prisoner as being kept in the most secure tower, well-fed, and treated with respect by Saint Mars. The prisoner would spend the last 5 years of his life in the Bastille. He died on November 19, 1703. He was buried the next day in the local parish cemetery under the name Marchioli. His age was given as about 45, though this is widely believed to be inaccurate, as he had been in prison for 34 years. After his death, extreme measures were taken to erase any trace of his existence. His cell was stripped bare, the walls were scraped and whitewashed, and all his furniture, clothing and effects were burned. The state wanted him to vanish not only from life but from history itself. They failed. The story was too strange, too compelling to be forgotten. The silence of the authorities only fueled the rumors. Who was this man? Why the mask? And why such extreme secrecy for over 3 decades? Let's first address the mask itself. The popular image, immortalized by Alexandre Dumas's famous novel, is of a heavy, riveted iron mask. This is almost certainly a romantic exaggeration. Such a device would have been impossibly cumbersome and would have caused severe skin infections and injury over 34 years. The reality was likely far more mundane, yet no less effective. The contemporary accounts, including Lieutenant Du Junca's diary, actually describe the mask as being made of black velvet. It would have been a simple cloth mask, perhaps reinforced with whalebone, designed to obscure the features without causing undue physical harm. It was a mask of secrecy, not of torture. The iron part of the legend was likely an addition by later writers, including the philosopher and polemicist Voltaire, to make the story more dramatic and to emphasize the cruelty of the state. But even a velvet mask begs the same question. Why? Why conceal this man's face? The obvious answer is that his face was recognizable. His features would have given away his identity to anyone who saw him, from a guard to a laundrywoman. And this identity was so dangerous to the state that it had to be suppressed at all costs. This brings us to the heart of the mystery, the grand question of who he was. Over the centuries, dozens of theories have been proposed. Let's examine the most prominent candidates. The most famous, the most romantic, and the most enduring theory is the one popularized by Voltaire and later immortalized by Dumas. This is the theory of the secret twin brother of King Louis XIV. The story goes like this. Queen Anne of Austria, wife of King Louis XIII, gives birth to the future Louis XIV. But then, a few hours later, to the shock of all present, she gives birth to a second identical twin. The king and his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, are faced with a terrible dilemma. The existence of 2 identical heirs to the throne is a recipe for disaster. It would inevitably lead to factions forming around each brother, and ultimately to a bloody civil war that could tear France apart. To save the kingdom, they make a terrible decision. The firstborn twin is acknowledged as the heir. The secondborn is spirited away, to be raised in secret, ignorant of his royal blood. Years later, the theory continues. The secret twin, now a young man, somehow learns of his true identity. Perhaps he discovers a letter, or perhaps his resemblance to the king becomes too obvious to ignore. He becomes a threat to the stability of the throne. And so the reigning King Louis XIV, his own brother, has him arrested and imprisoned for life, his face masked to hide the damning royal resemblance. It is a magnificent story. It has all the elements of a great tragedy. Sibling rivalry, state secrets, a stolen birthright. It neatly explains the extreme secrecy, the respectful treatment of the prisoner, and most importantly, the need for the mask. If his face was identical to the king's, then no one could be allowed to see it. But is it true? As compelling as it is, the twin brother theory has almost no historical evidence to support it. The birth of Louis XIV was not a private affair. It was a major public event, witnessed by dozens of courtiers and officials, precisely to prevent any later disputes about the legitimacy of the heir. The idea that a second secret birth could have been concealed from the entire French court is highly improbable. Furthermore, the early letters about the prisoner, Eustache d'Augre, explicitly refer to him as only a valet. While this could have been a code, it seems a strange way to refer to the king's own brother, even in a secret correspondence. The twin theory remains a powerful piece of fiction, a testament to the storytelling genius of Voltaire and Dumas, but it is almost certainly not historical fact. So, if not the king's twin, who else? Another popular royal theory is that the prisoner was the illegitimate son of a powerful figure. One candidate proposed is that he was the son of Queen Anne of Austria, but not by her husband King Louis XIII. The rumor is that she had an affair, perhaps with the powerful Cardinal Mazarin, and that the masked man was the result. Imprisoning the evidence of the Queen Mother's infidelity would certainly be a matter of high state security. A more tantalizing version of this theory suggests that the prisoner was the true, biological son of Louis XIV himself. Louis XIV had many mistresses and numerous illegitimate children, most of whom he officially recognized and elevated to high positions. But what if there was one he couldn't recognize? The theory goes that in his youth, Louis had an affair with a lady-in-waiting, and she gave birth to a son. This son, as an adult, perhaps committed some terrible Crimea murder, a major political indiscretion that so embarrassed the king that he had to be disappeared from the world, but couldn't be executed because he was the king's own blood. This would explain the respectful treatment but also the lifelong imprisonment. Again, it is a plausible scenario, but one for which there is no direct evidence, no name, no specific crime we can point to. Let's move away from the high royalty for a moment and consider candidates from the world of politics and espionage. The 17th century was a time of constant intrigue. Could the man in the iron mask have been a diplomat or a spy who knew a dangerous secret? One candidate who was seriously considered for many years was an Italian diplomat named Ercole Antonio Mattioli. Mattioli was a minister for the Duke of Mantua. In the late 1670s, he was involved in secret negotiations to sell the strategically important fortress of Casale to France. After taking a hefty bribe from the French, Mattioli double-crossed them, revealing the secret negotiations to France's enemies. King Louis XIV was furious. He ordered Mattioli to be kidnapped from Italian soil, an illegal act of abduction, and imprisoned in Pignerol. Mattioli seems like a strong candidate. The crime was serious enough to anger the king personally. He was imprisoned at Pignerol at the right time, and his name, Mattioli, is strikingly similar to the name under which the masked prisoner was buried, Marchioli. For a long time, many historians believed Mattioli was the man. However, there are major problems with this theory. Official records show that Mattioli was not treated with the same level of secrecy as our mysterious prisoner. Other inmates and guards knew who he was. He was allowed to complain openly about his captivity. Most importantly, the records clearly show that Mattioli died in 1694, nearly a decade before the man in the iron mask died in the Bastille. And the masked man was already wearing his mask at Sainte Marguerite years before Mattioli's death. So, while Mattioli was a real and important prisoner, he cannot have been the man in the iron mask. The similarity of the burial name is likely just a coincidence, or perhaps a deliberate red herring planted by Saint Mars. What about a disgraced general? The candidate in this category is the Lieutenant General Vivien de Bulland. During a military campaign in 1691, Bulland was ordered to besiege the town of Cuneo. Panicked by rumors of approaching enemy forces, he abandoned the siege in a fit of cowardice, leaving behind his cannons and all his wounded soldiers. King Louis XIV, a monarch who prized military glory above all else, was said to have been incandescent with rage. An entry in a secret military record states that Bulland was to be arrested and conducted to the fortress of Pignerol, where he will be locked in a cell and masked. This seems incredibly promising. We have a serious crime, the king's personal anger, and a direct mention of both Pignerol and a mask. However, the timing is all wrong. This incident happened in 1691. Our prisoner Eustache Dogger was arrested way back in 1669, more than 2 decades earlier. Also, other records show that General de Bouillon was not, in fact, imprisoned for life. He was publicly disgraced and his career was over, but he was eventually released and died at home. He was not the lifelong captive of Saint Mars. This process of elimination, this dismissal of the more famous and romantic candidates, brings us back to the very beginning. It brings us back to that first letter, and that first strangely insignificant name, Eustache Dogger. For a long time, historians dismissed Dogger. They assumed his name was just a pseudonym for a more important person. They couldn't believe that a mere valet would warrant such extraordinary treatment. But in the 20th century, modern historians, digging deeper into the archives, began to champion a new theory. What if the truth was exactly what the letters said? What if the prisoner really was a man named Eustache Dogger? And what if his crime was not that he was a prince, but that he knew the secrets of a prince? This theory, often called the valet theory, has become the leading candidate among professional historians today. It is less romantic, but it has the great advantage of fitting the known facts much better than any other. The research has uncovered a real historical figure named Eustache Dogger. He was involved in some shady business in the 1660s, including a scandal involving poisons and black magic that reached into the highest levels of the French court, a scandal known as the Affair of the Poisons. But the key to this theory is not what Dogger himself did, but who he might have worked for and what he might have known. Researchers have pointed out the strange coincidence that Dogger was arrested shortly after the death of Cardinal Mazarin, the powerful chief minister who had effectively ruled France during Louis XIV's youth. Mazarin was known to have amassed a colossal, and probably illegal, personal fortune. Some of this fortune may have even been stolen from the English royal family. The theory suggests that Eustache Dogger was a valet or a minor official who worked for Cardinal Mazarin's treasurer. In this position, he would have been privy to the intricate and deeply illegal financial dealings of his master. He would have known where the bodies were buried, financially speaking. After Mazarin's death, King Louis XIV and his new finance minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert were trying to recover this vast stolen fortune for the French state. Eustache Dogger, with his intimate knowledge of these secret transactions, would have been both a valuable resource and an immense liability. He knew too much. He knew things that could embarrass the French crown and its dealings with other nations. Another version of the valet theory suggests Dogger was involved not in financial secrets, but in the secret, scandalous private life of a high-ranking courtier or even a member of the king's own government. The 17th century court was a hotbed of sexual intrigue, and a valet would have been in a prime position to know about affairs, illegitimate children, or other unmentionable vices that could destroy a powerful man's career if revealed. In this scenario, Dogger's crime was not his own actions but his knowledge. He was arrested not to be punished but to be silenced. He was a living vault of dangerous information. This explains the extreme secrecy. It also explains the strange duality of his treatment. He was kept in the strictest isolation, masked so no one could ever identify and question him. But he was also treated with a degree of respect, given good food, seen by a doctor because he was not a common criminal. He was a man being protected by the state from ever speaking. It also perfectly explains Louvois' strange insistence that he was only a valet. It wasn't a code. It was a literal instruction to Saint Mars. This man has no status of his own. His importance comes only from the secrets he carries. Don't treat him like a nobleman. This theory may lack the swashbuckling romance of a secret twin, but it has the ring of bureaucratic truth. It smells of real-world politics and the cold, hard calculus of state security. The man in the iron mask may not have been a prince, but a humble man whose misfortune was to have seen or heard something he was never meant to. His life was sacrificed not for a crown, but for a secret. And so we are left with this haunting image. A man perhaps named Eustache Dogger, spending 34 years in captivity. A journey through 4 prisons from the mountains to the sea, and finally to the heart of Paris. Always in the care of the same jailer, Saint Mars, whose entire career became intertwined with the life of his secret charge. Always hidden, first by stone walls and locked doors, and later, when he had to be moved through the world, by a simple mask of black velvet. His life was a void, a carefully constructed silence. But in death, he achieved a strange and lasting fame. He became a symbol. For Voltaire and the Enlightenment philosophers, he was a symbol of the tyranny and cruelty of absolute monarchy. For novelists like Dumas, he was a symbol of romance, adventure, and lost causes. For us today, he remains one of the greatest of all historical mysteries, a human question mark. He reminds us that history is not just a collection of known facts, but is also shaped by the secrets that are kept, the stories that are erased, and the quiet, forgotten lives that are lived out in the shadows. The Man in the Iron Mask is famous not because we know who he was, but precisely because we don't. And in that not knowing, we are free to imagine, to speculate, and to wonder. And that is a form of immortality that not even the Sun King could achieve. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the dungeons of French history. The tale of the Man in the Iron Mask is a powerful reminder of how a single, compelling mystery can capture the human imagination for centuries. If you found this exploration of one of history's most famous prisoners compelling, please consider showing your support by liking this audio, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. It's the best way to ensure you don't miss our next deep dive into the mysteries of the past. Now the final judgment falls to you. Having heard the evidence and the main theories, who do you think the Man in the Iron Mask truly was? Do you favor the romantic, royal theories of a secret twin or an illegitimate son? Or do you find the more grounded, historical theory of the valet who knew too much to be more convincing? Is there another theory you've heard that we didn't cover? We would love to hear your thoughts and your own detective work. Please share your conclusions in the comments section below. The identity of the prisoner may be lost to time, but his story continues to challenge us, forcing us to think about the nature of power, justice, and identity itself. He is a testament to the idea that sometimes, the most powerful stories are not about the known, but about the unknown. Until next time, sleep well.